The alien commander's mocking laughter echoed as the weak human girl lay before him. But what happened next was beyond Zarek comprehension. Sergeant Jack Monroe shot the arrogant alien with his sniper rifle and watched calmly as the arrogant general bled out into the sand, knowing this battle would decide the fate of humanity. The Zarek had pushed them back to this final barren planet, and failure here meant the extinction of humankind. The true battle was about to begin, and humanity's survival now rested on the shoulders of Monroe and his brave soldiers. The dark before sunrise held tense silence until the first rays of light showed in the sky. The calm broke when the bombardment started, violent shakes hitting the ground under Jack Monroe's boots. Explosions from space broke the early morning quiet, sand geysers erupting where the energy blasts landed. Jack shielded his face from the flying debris, his eyes locked on the horizon. "Brace for impact!" Jack yelled over the noise, his voice steady, a rock in the storm. The Zarek ground forces came out like a black tide along the horizon, their metal arms and cold synthetic faces charged, kicking up dust clouds as they moved toward Jack's platoon. "Fire at will! Hold your ground!" Monroe ordered. His platoon fired rapid laser bursts, slicing through the advancing biomechanical soldiers. The sound of gunfire mixed with the hum of the Zarek, the noise of war. Jack scanned the battlefield, glancing from soldier to soldier. Despite the bad odds, his platoon held their position. The crackle of laser fire filled the air, interrupted by the thuds of Zarek bodies hitting the sand. But the Zarek kept coming, wave after wave. "We won't go down without a fight," Monroe muttered, firing at the Zarek line. He looked over his shoulder and saw Connors hunched over a terminal, fingers flying over the keys. "Got something!" Connors' voice came through the radio. Her eyes stayed on the screen, data scrolling fast. Monroe dove behind a crumbled wall, blasting two Zarek that came close. "Talk to me, Connors." "I'm in their network," she shouted back, focus steady. "Their comms are chaotic. I see a pattern in their shield rotations. A big warship is open every third cycle." Jack's mind raced. "Keep at it," he called, ducking as a plasma bolt burned the air above him. Monroe told Connors news to the squad, giving orders quickly. "Stokes, Kim, go left when I say. Pierce, you and Davis go right. Hit them when the shields go down." On Connors' next signal, they moved. Monroe led Stokes and Kim through the laser fire. The platoon broke into two groups, both making fast, flanking moves. Confusion went through the Zarek ranks, their formation disrupted. Jack felt a rush of adrenaline as they used the opening. Lasers found their marks, and Zarek soldiers fell in the broken lines. The surprise attack gave the humans a short advantage, a crack in the endless assault. Then another message from Connors. "That warship's shield is down again. Now's your chance." Monroe didn't hesitate. "Orbital team, target the warship. Fire on my go." A brief pause, then a voice said, "Coordinates locked. Ready to shoot." "Now!" Jack shouted. The sky lit up as the orbital cannons fired on the exposed warship. The shield flickered and failed under the barrage. A moment later, the warship exploded in a silent blaze, fragments flying across the sky. Happy shouts came over the radio, but Jack was already moving, eyes on the next target. "Keep the pressure up. Push them back." The platoon rallied, lifted by their surprise win. Jack led the charge, his rifle steady as he moved soldier to soldier, offering a firm hand or quick order. The Zarek, surprised by losing one of their ships, slowed their advance. Jack's platoon moved forward, using the break to boost defenses and help the wounded. The tide had turned, if only a little. As Jack looked over the battlefield, his resolve in his eyes didn't waver. Humanity would not go quietly. They would fight to the very end, and if the Zarek underestimated them, it would be at their own risk. The sand hit Monroe's visor hard, pounding it like 100 hammers. He looked out at the raging storm blowing orange dust over the battlefield. This was a rare break. Monroe radioed his soldiers. "Cease fire! Take cover!" The troops moved toward a rocky outcrop, using Monroe's voice to guide them through the blowing haze. The rocks blocked the storm's winds and sand. Monroe set up a command center in the shelter. Connors tapped into the storm's wild energy, eyes on her screen. The static was good cover for her to hack in deep. "Small window, going deeper," she told Monroe, ready but worried. Monroe watched her type fast and precise on the keys. "What do you see?" he asked. She looked up. "They're wiping out the colony after the storm." Monroe's jaw clenched. They had to hit first. "We strike them before the storm clears," he said. Connors nodded, already thinking the same. Together they made a bold plan, using every bit of cunning and guts left. While the storm raged outside, their minds stormed inside. A small team would sneak onto the Zarek mothership, controlling the robots, and blow it up from within. The platoon listened to Monroe's plan, checking gear and weapons. They knew the stakes and were ready. "Storm hides our move. Stay sharp, stay quiet, watch each other's backs. Now's our chance to turn the war around," Monroe said. Connors kept hacking, using the storm to hide their plan from the enemy. Every second mattered. Eyes on her screen, she kept their access open. The Zarek army waited while sand screamed and winds roared. Monroe's team readied themselves, a small force against an endless army. Surprise was everything. The winds died down, the sandstorm faded, revealing the huge black alien warship. Jack and Connors wore the enemy's dark stealth suits. They moved toward the towering ship. They sneaked beneath it, careful to stay hidden. Thick landing struts stretched down, anchoring the warship. Jack put explosives on one strut. His hands worked fast, used to this. Connors watched his back. Her fingers tapped a stolen datapad, hacking the alien tech. The unfamiliar system gave in to her persistence. She got into the ship's core, its maze of data. She put in a virus to destroy it from within. Jack set the last charge and nodded to Connors. Their eyes met, knowing the next minutes could change the war. Connors hit the last button and gave the signal. They moved back together, hearts speeding with each step from the warship. At a safe distance, Jack held the detonator tight. They took cover behind a broken boulder. The silence made the earlier storm seem quiet. Jack hit the button. The ground shook violently. A deafening blast came from the explosives. Flames and debris burst from the ship's underside, ripping up through the lower decks, striking its heart. The shield flickered and died, leaving the ship exposed. Jack radioed, "Strike now!" His voice left no doubt. The platoon charged from their posts, fast and coordinated. Their attack followed the explosion like thunder after lightning, a flood of fire and payback on the confused enemy. The alien troops stumbled, their synthetic faces turning to the destruction, processing this new threat. But the humans met them fiercely, taking the fight to an enemy, learning what human will meant. Amidst the chaos, Jack stood firm, a symbol of defiance. The aliens knew their mistake. Underestimating the human spirit could be their last. The Zarek warship shuddered violently as gravity tore at its now exposed hull. Chunks of metal snapped free, allowing air to hiss out into the orange sky. Monroe gripped the heavy Zarek cannon he'd snatched from wreckage, its weight unfamiliar but purpose clear. He took aim at the warship's guts and fired. The blast slammed its belly, kickback almost pulling Monroe's arms from their sockets. Connors bent over the makeshift console, fingers racing across strange keys. Sweat ran down her skin, but she stared fixedly at her task. A low hum filled the air before the Zarek drones jerked and spun mid-flight. "Jack! Got 'em!" Connors yelled over the din. "Sent our new toys to play." Monroe nodded wordlessly. The drones dove like birds of prey, smashing into the wounded warship's hull. The sounds of tearing metal and detonating munitions filled the air. Around Monroe, soldiers lifted Zarek guns, adding relentless fire to the fray. He squeezed the alien cannon's trigger over and over, blows tearing through armor. Their combined barrage was an unstoppable rain of violence against the enemy ship. The Leviathan fought back, engines flaring for one final burst, but the sabotage ran too deep. Monroe watched as the ship lost its battle against gravity's pull. Its last defiant roar was drowned out by human fury. The warship sagged, then began its final descent to the dust below. Monroe barked orders into the comms. "Hit it with everything!" The ship fell faster now, plummeting uncontrolled. The soldiers kept firing, uncompromising and merciless. When it hit ground, the impact trembled beneath them. A cloud of fire and debris mushroomed upward. In the graveyard, silence that followed, Monroe and his troops lowered their weapons. Connors approached, datapad slipping forgotten from her grasp. No words were needed. The tide had turned. The ground shook under Jack Monroe's feet as the massive Zarek flagship descended. He gripped his rifle, scanning the scattered enemy units. With the ship gone, they were aimless, gears grinding, no real purpose. "Platoon! Line up 2 by 2! Watch for stragglers!" Monroe barked orders, sharp and clear. The soldiers fell into formation, rifles ready. Monroe nodded at Connors, decrypting a message on the glowing terminal screen. Connors looked up, the desperation in the enemy message clear on her face. "General Craxus is coming. He's furious," she said, barely heard over the wind. Monroe strode past his troops, meeting each soldier's eyes, his voice carried strong. "They're sending Craxus to fix this mess. But he won't find a retreating force. He'll find us ready to end this." Monroe started his advance, boots kicking up cold sand with purpose. The platoon moved as one, rifles firing controlled bursts, cutting down confused enemies. The Zarek bots stumbled, gears grinding, trying to regroup. But the humans were too quick, exploiting weaknesses, rifles cracking precisely. Connors kept watch on the terminal and the fight, graceful and focused. Her fingers raced across the keys, keeping their intelligence advantage. A blast struck behind her and she ducked, eyes barely leaving the screen. Monroe moved with the platoon, steady as stone amid the shifting sands. He darted between soldiers with purpose, coordinating the deadly game. Cover each other, short bursts, watch the flanks. The Zarek had assumed human weakness, a fatal mistake. Each fallen bot marked the platoon's relentless push, their training and determination clear. They secured a perimeter, and Monroe's voice came strong over the comms. "Hold position. This is ours now. When Craxus lands, he'll face humanity's full might. We'll show him his error." Connors nodded, hands flying on the terminal, ready to disrupt the enemy. The troops steadied themselves, breaths even, rifles up. They had gone from defenders to aggressors, a line in the sand. They waited, grips tight, eyes squinting against sunlight, ears tuned for the incoming commander. Humanity's resilience stood ready for a final stand, their future at stake. The shuttle slammed the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. General Craxus stepped out, a hulking alien beast towering over the humans. His elite guard filed behind, armor clanking, guns ready. Their boots crunched the sand as they got into formation. Craxus barked orders in his deep growling voice. His soldiers straightened up, focused. "Form up!" he yelled. Jack Monroe saw the Zarek shift into lines. Craxus raised his arm, swung it forward. "Forward march!" The Zarek marched as one, a wall of metal and death. Jack tightened his grip on his rifle. "Steady," he whispered into the comm. "Wait for it." Craxus led the march, pounding the sand with massive steps. He towered over even his own troops, a giant going to war. His fist clenched a cannon-like weapon, steam hissing from the barrel. The Zarek closed in. Jack broke into a sprint towards them. "Hold!" His voice stayed calm but commanded authority. The human soldiers took aim, fingers on triggers. A breath passed. "Fire!" Jack's order cut through the noise. Lasers ripped between the lines, but Craxus kept coming, deflecting shots with his wrist device. Monroe dodged a blast from Craxus's cannon that turned the ground behind him to glass. The giant moved fast, despite his bulk, blows precise and calculated. Jack blocked a punch with his arm, pain jolting through his bones. "He's not just muscle," he muttered. Each of Craxus's steps forced Jack back. The elite guard followed, pinning the humans with blistering fire. Jack saw an opening as Craxus overswung. He struck, his rifle smashing the general's ribs. Craxus only grunted, spun, and backhanded Jack hard enough to taste blood. Jack rolled up, firing. "Push forward," the soldiers responded, driving the Zarek back. Craxus wiped the blood from his busted lip and snarled. He plowed into the humans, smashing aside whole rows with each pass. Monroe jumped back in, firing until empty. He drew a knife and met Craxus's next swing. The two clashed in close combat, human determination against alien power. Jack ducked a vicious punch and slashed Craxus's wrist, sparking off metal. The general moved fluidly, countering Jack's every attack. Jack realized Craxus wasn't just fighting, but also commanding with subtle signals. The elite guard advanced in tight formation despite the chaos. The Zarik line pushed forward, gaining ground. Jack felt his platoon pressed against the rocks. Connors's strained voice rang out, "Jack! Left now!" Jack vaulted left as fire mowed down his previous spot. He rolled up behind Craxus and stabbed into a joint. Craxus roared, more rage than laughter. He swung, but Jack was already gone, back with his men. "Keep hitting them!" Jack yelled. "Don't stop!" Emboldened, the humans surged forward, blazing guns. Craxus bellowed orders, but his guard now protected their wounded leader, formation fraying. Jack moved through the line, targeting Zarek weak points. His heart pounded as they pushed back, gaining ground. He met Craxus's stare across the field, seeing the grudging respect in the general's eyes. They were only human, but they stood their ground. The grit crushed under Jack's boots as he slid behind the cold steel wall. His team huddled beside him, breathing hard in the choking dust. No retreat now. This was Earth's last stand, its final grab for what it needed. Connors worked the control panel. 2 minutes, Jack! Eyes locked on the flickering screen, she dug into the machine's guts. Wires and circuits laid open to her fingers. Jack peered around the corner. Craxus stood firm amid the clatter of gunfire. This was it. Succeed or die. 2 minutes, Jack's voice boomed. The Zarek marched forward, metal boots pounding with mechanical force. The humans fired from cover, shots sparking off alien armor. Connors cursed, slamming the override as a klaxon blared. The machinery groaned to life in protest. The ground rumbled, then violently shook. Jack steadied himself as the Zarek stumbled. Connors smashed the red trigger. The earth roared, raw and mechanical. Huge drills erupted, tearing through rock and soil. The vibrations climbed to a raging tremor, the planet itself now fighting the invasion. Zarek soldiers flew like ragdolls, formations shattered. The humans watched amazed as Connor's shockwave turned the tide. Jack met Craxus's eye. No more laughter. Now there was respect, realization that humans were a force. "Now!" Jack's shout pierced the quake's silence. The humans burst out, firing hard. Confusion gave them their chance, their moment to regain ground and show spirit. Jack charged, leading the strike. Connors stayed at the controls, ready with more seismic hell if needed. Craxus rallied his shaken guards. Discipline frayed but unbroken, they clashed with the humans. A different fight now. Jack saw it in the general's eyes. This planet would not fall easily. Not while humanity stood firm. Monroe's wrist comm buzzed, breaking through the chaos. He hit it hard and squinted at the voice that came through, clear. Reinforcements on the way, but days out. Hold position. Days they didn't have. "Damn," he said, fist hitting the wall. Connors wiped the dust from her forehead. She studied the wreck of the warship, smoke curling from its torn belly. Her voice carried urgency. "Jack, we can still hit them where it hurts." She pointed at the hulk. "Their weapons are still inside, intact." Monroe met her eyes. A spark of hope flared up. "You think we can use their own guns against the fleet?" Connors nodded. She pulled a screen closer, fingers moving fast over the alien symbols. "There's a control hub in there, barely touched. Now or never." Monroe scanned the small group left. "Who's in?" His voice rang out over the distant fire. The volunteers stepped forward, faces grim, weapons ready. This was their one shot. They didn't speak of the odds. No need. The squad moved, boots crunching on rubble. They entered the fallen ship through a torn side. Inside was chaos, sparking wires dangling from ceilings, hazy light flickering from damaged panels. They found the hub, a room of blinking alien panels. Connors dove into the controls, her translation patch interfacing with the tech. "Cover me," she said. "I can get these cannons firing." Monroe crouched at the door, rifle scanning the shadows. His team took positions, a defiant circle inside the fallen beast. Time slowed as Connors worked, decrypting commands with calm focus despite the madness outside. "Almost there," Connors breathed. "Come on, you alien junk." A low whir filled the room. The squad tensed. Screens turned from angry red to neutral blue, one by one. Connors let out a breath. "Got it. The weapons are ours now." Her eyes gleamed with sweat and victory. Monroe keyed his comm. "Get the guns ready," he ordered. "Target their fleet." The squad held their breath. Outside, the sound of alien weapons charging filled the air. The massive guns rose like dark towers. Monroe watched the clear sky, free of dust and dread. The cannons fired. Light streaked through the sky, tearing toward the orbiting enemy ships. The sound was deafening, the sight stunning. They had turned the tide. The squad erupted in cheers, exhaustion and relief shaking their bodies. They slapped Monroe's back and hugged Connors. Facing the impossible, they hadn't just survived. They struck back. Monroe watched explosions bloom in the sky like deadly flowers. He keyed his comm again. "Command, the alien fleet's been hit." A pause, then cheers from the other end. "Confirmed, good work, Monroe. Hold on. We're coming." Monroe and his squad settled into the control hub, waiting for the reinforcements now arriving to a changed battle. The ragtag team, together in the beast's belly they'd slain, proved humanity could bite back as fiercely as any enemy when pushed to the brink. They showed the galaxy Earth's iron resolve. The flagship groaned and creaked around Monroe and his team. Holes gaped in the metal walls. Severed wires dangled and sparked. The burnt metal stunk. They picked through the mess carefully, senses alert. The ship's defenses sputtered alive. Guns sprayed. The tight halls forced single file. Monroe led, rifle ready. Eyes sharp, he took them through. At the junction, Craxus's elite attacked. Shots cracked the stale air. Monroe's team fired back loudly in the enclosed space. Monroe rolled under a bolt. "Flank them!" he shouted quickly. They split up. Some laid down cover fire. The others moved around the sides, trained for close quarters, no room for mistakes. They took down the soldiers with tight shots. Their tactics worked. Past the junction, they hurried on, boots thumping metal. Each corner could mean death, but they pushed ahead. The command center was close. It controlled the weapons. Connors slid in and worked the alien controls fast. The rest spread out, guarding the entrance. Sweat soaked their clothes as temperatures rose. Monroe watched the hall over a console. Zarek Boots approached steadily. He signaled the team. They braced themselves, fingers on triggers. Connors focused. Screens blinked wildly. "Cover me," she said tightly. "Not long now." Monroe nodded once. He trusted her fully. The Zarek crashed against them fiercely. They knew what was at stake. Metal struck metal. Grunts and yells filled the air. The humans parried each blow. Monroe's rifle emptied. He smoothly switched to a pistol without pause. Automatic. He saw Connors working urgently. "Got it!" she cried out. Around them, guns moved and targeted the enemy ships above. They waited, eyes on Connors. With a last press, she attacked. Cannons boomed, striking the fleet. The ship shuddered hard. Monroe's team shouted and pushed harder. They had done it, turned the tide. Connors sagged against the console, spent. "It's done," she whispered. Monroe touched her shoulder firmly. "Let's greet our friends," he stated. Faces set, they readied themselves. Soon they would show no retreat. Connor's fingers pounded the console. The click-clack of the buttons cut through the distant booms and her ragged breath. The alien symbols on the screens twisted as she forced the ship's tech to obey her desperate touch. The room hummed with the power of the warship, ready to strike. Monroe pressed against the cool metal wall, eyes darting to each door. His rifle lay heavy in his grip, the tang of gunpowder in his nose. The squad huddled close around Connors, tense for combat. The ship groaned, creaks and whines from the battered hull. The soldiers felt the reluctant ally shifting under their feet. The screen blinked green. "Firing ready," Connors stated plainly, steel in her words. Monroe scanned the grimy, sweating faces. Fear and grit shone in their eyes, hands tight on their guns, focus on Connors. She held the key. Connors tapped the console. The cannons rumbled, vibrating the floor and into their bones. She slammed the red button, worn but working. The cannons boomed, thundering defiance across the sky. The squad felt the rhythmic blasts through their feet, a war drum heralding their stand. At the viewports, fire lit the dusty sky. Zarek ships ruptured, exposing their guts to the void. Blooms of flame marked their deaths against the black. Fiery wrecks streaked down, fallen stars burning the barren ground with pyres of the defeated. Smoke and fire painted destruction. Shoulders touching, they watched their impossible victory play across the sky. The planet held its breath, basking in the spectacle. Their cheers filled the room, relief and triumph echoing off the walls. Connors added her voice, eyes shining at the burning ships. The comm crackled, Craxus roaring through the wires. "Destroy one ship, 100 more will come. Your fate is sealed," he vowed, venom dripping from each word. Silence choked the room, his threat a fog in their lungs. Monroe met their eyes, seeing the resolve that brought them here. "Good hit. Not done yet," he said, steel under his calm. He watched the burning enemy. "Stay sharp. They'll strike with all they've got. We'll be ready." The soldiers nodded, spirits bolstered. Clicks and clacks echoed as they checked their weapons, reaffirming their readiness. Monroe nodded to Connors in respect for the skills that gave them a chance. As fires raged, they took position, the room now a fortress. Together, they would meet the Zarek wrath, unbroken and unyielding. This band stood defiant on an alien world, their courage the mark of humanity, ready for war. The ground trembled not with man-made machines, but the dark shadow of the massive Zarek dreadnought, cutting through the thin earth clouds. The black ship dwarfed the carnage below, its size silencing soldiers from both sides. Men stared up, hearts sinking, grips loosening on their weapons. Monroe didn't need to look up to know. The shaking ground told him everything. "Eyes front, move out!" he shouted to his platoon, pointing to the mining facility. "We can't win against that monster. Head for evac now!" The dreadnought blasted craters that swallowed the battlefield. Rocks and metal poured down. Monroe sprinted, leading his team through the maze of mangled equipment and twisted metal that minutes ago protected them. Connors rushed to the communication station, pack in hand. She slid open the panels, fingers flying across the boards within. "Sending distress signal," she said steadily amid the chaos. "Come in, fleet. We need evac at the mining site. Heavy bombardment. Emergency." Crackling, then a voice. "Copy that. Coordinates received. Preparing to—" The line went dead as another blast drowned out all sound. Monroe ducked, a shockwave ripping the air from his lungs. "They know we're here!" yelled Connors. "The fleet's coming, but that ship—" No need to finish. Monroe's squad regrouped in the debris, faces set with determination. "Hold the line! Give the fleet time!" Monroe ordered. "Dig in! Do whatever it takes to stay alive!" They scattered, finding cover in the wreckage. The dreadnought boomed, each hit a brutal reminder of its power. They fired back, not to damage, but to say, "We're still here." Monroe watched his soldiers' defiance. They braced for the siege, ready to fight, refusing to vanish quietly. They might die, but would be a thorn in this galactic terror's side, showing humanity does not yield. The ship loomed, but their will stood firm. The sky boomed as the huge spaceship fired its massive cannons. Metal monsters flew overhead, their constant bombardment shaking the ground. Monroe stood firm, boots planted in the scorched dirt, yelling over the deafening noise. "Hold this position!" Monroe ordered. Dust and smoke choked the air. It echoed with the thunder of artillery shells exploding. His scattered troops took cover behind twisted metal and broken rocks, rifles ready, eyes blazing with determination to keep fighting. Monroe watched his soldiers, jaws clenched tight, no words needed. They knew what was at stake. They traded silent nods, communicating like warriors in combat. Their guns cracked back at the attacks from above, refusing to yield. Civilians, faces pale with fear, ran for the promised safety of the mines. Every second counted as the soldiers risked their lives to buy them time. Through the haze of smoke and embers, a figure emerged. Craxus, the Zarek general, strode onto the battlefield. His huge body parted the fog, each step bringing him closer to his chosen enemy. Monroe locked eyes with the alien leader. Craxus lifted his bizarre weapon, a nightmarish mix of metal and flesh, and pointed it right at Monroe. With a roar that cut through the din, Craxus bellowed, "Human, your resistance ends now." Monroe responded not with words, but action. He signaled his troops. Together, they charged from their barricades. Lasers sliced the air, bullets found their marks. Though outgunned, they had something stronger, fierce determination to protect their people. Craxus advanced, blasts from his weapon gouging craters in the earth. But Monroe and his soldiers moved with desperate coordination, targeting shots, deliberate motion. They surrounded the general, giving no ground. The collision was immense, a lethal dance, as human and alien clashed amid the inferno. Craxus swung his massive weapon, mighty but blocked each time by the calculated defense of Monroe's troops. The fight raged on, the stutter of gunfire, the alien weapons' chatter, and the unrelenting human shouts fused into a symphony of survival. Monroe led with full strength, resolve unbroken, even as the spaceship tried to crush them. Craxus kept coming, unrelenting, but each step contested, each blow deflected. The human spirit, embodied in the soldiers before him, would not yield. Monroe, standing with his troops, knew their courage was writing history. The ship kept hammering, a ceaseless barrage of fire and metal. But on the ground, the human line held fast, a final stand of defiance in a world gone mad with war. Monroe and his soldiers, standing tall in the storm, showed Craxus that humanity's spirit would never break. Monroe stood facing Craxus, only meters apart under the massive dreadnought shadowing them. Dirt and blood covered their faces. Every hit and block mattered. They fought for more than just themselves. Their fight would decide the future for their species. Craxus swung a fist strong as a warhammer, aiming for a crushing blow. Monroe dodged just in time, feeling the wind of the missed punch. He quickly punched back, driving his fist hard into Craxus' gut. The general staggered but still laughed loud over the battle noise. "You fight with heart, human, but it won't save you." Monroe didn't answer. His breath came fast, arms heavy as he readied for the next exchange. The deadly dance drained him. He knew he couldn't last much longer. In the makeshift bunker, Connors worked fast. She ripped cables from the walls, twisted them around metal rods, connecting Zarek salvage into jury-rigged circuits. Her hands flew over her invention, securing the final links. She glanced at a small display, its light weak but steady. She took a deep breath and flipped the switch she'd built. A soft whine grew until a screeching crescendo. With a snap, her device pulsed with power. The dreadnought's lower guns, those beasts churning the ground into craters, fell silent. The bombardment ceased as if the ship held its breath. Quiet fell over the battlefield, soldiers and aliens alike turning to stare at the now silent giant overhead. Monroe and Craxus paused, tense, sweat dripping, the sudden quiet more shocking than any explosion. Monroe saw opportunity. He pressed the attack, moving fast and precise. Craxus blocked, but slower, surprised. Without the dreadnought's cover, the Zarek looked up, uncertainty on their faces. Monroe's soldiers rallied, shouting to pierce the silence. "Push them back! Now's our chance!" Monroe heard his troops, felt their energy renew. He saw the doubt flicker in Craxus's eyes. They circled each other cautiously, both aware the fight had changed. Outside now, Connors watched her smoking, fizzled device. She tossed it away and grabbed a rifle, joining the advancing human line. She fired measured shots, absolute focus. The crippled dreadnought loomed silent overhead, but on the ground, human resolve flourished, powered by the opening Connors had created. They pressed onward, gaining ground step by hard-fought step. Craxus roared fury and frustration, realizing the shift in power. But Monroe met his charge with his own defiant roar. They collided, the sound of their struggle proving their resolve. They exchanged blows with conviction, every soldier feeling the momentum shift. This was a fight for their lives, home, and legacy. The dreadnought stayed silent, its threat temporarily forgotten as human and alien grappled with their actions' consequences on the muddy, blood-soaked ground. The dreadnought's shadow covered Monroe and Craxus. Dust swirled around them as Monroe ducked Craxus's weapon swing. Monroe's heart pounded in his ears louder than the alien's laugh. No time for hesitation or doubt. Monroe saw an opening as Craxus regained balance from his missed swing. Monroe tensed his muscles and struck, driving his fist into Craxus's jaw. The punch jerked the general's head back. Craxus stumbled, shocked by the blow. Time slowed as Craxus wavered, stunned. A heavy silence came before the clash to follow. The opening they needed. Monroe yelled, "Advance!" The platoons charged from cover, rifles firing. Human chants rang out across the battlefield, defying the Zarek growls. The human soldiers showed new spirit, piercing the Zarek's uncertainty. The human fire was relentless and precise, each shot speaking to the human will to survive and fight. Monroe stepped back, ready to join his troops, but eyes still locked with Craxus. A new understanding passed between them. Monroe was more than a soldier. Craxus shook his head, trying to clear it. His soldiers glanced between him and the advancing humans, doubt spreading. Sharp orders snapped across Zarek ranks. The humans pushed to take advantage, chanting with each volley, each step forward. "Stand firm! Hold the line!" The commands echoed among the humans, the ground their stage, hearts fueled by Connor's device. Craxus regained his posture, but remained wary. The tide had turned. The silent dreadnought loomed. Monroe nodded to his platoon, acknowledging their achievement. boots dug into dirt, hands steadied on triggers, movements synchronized in combat's dance. Gunfire clattered, men and women shouted for the future. Their resonant call, resistance, rang in their hearts. The scene was set not just in bodies and noise, but in the shared breath of humans pushing back the darkness that consumed their world. As Zarek lines wavered under the human ferocity, Monroe felt the shift. They were more than soldiers. They were humanity, unbroken. Connors punched the worn keypad, static hissing as the message came through. Her eyes fixed to the screen. Hope flickered seeing the incoming Earth fleet. She yelled, "They're coming, but not fast enough! We need more time!" The room revved up as the dreadnought rumbled overhead, engines droning, promising destruction. The massive shadow loomed, the attack a silent promise to annihilate everything below. Monroe scanned the dusty battlefield, tactical thoughts racing. He wasted no time. "Listen up. Help's coming, but we're the line stopping that thing above. We hold no matter what." He sprinted to the huddled soldiers behind jagged walls, faces smeared in dirt, focused. They knew the stakes. They understood the grim odds. Grips tightened on rifles, fingers steadied on triggers. Monroe met their eyes, reflecting their fiery determination. "We stand ground, not one step back." His voice cut through uncertainty, forged in resolve. Connors watched Monroe rally them, heart pounding as console lights blinked. Her hands danced across controls, ensuring the beacon stayed on, guiding the fleet through chaos. The dreadnought engines roared, a beast awakening with one purpose. The ground shook, rocks bouncing as prelude to the coming firestorm. Soldiers braced, ready to make a final stand on this broken ground. The alien ship began glowing, prepping cannons. The energy built below, the hum of death in the air. Silent glances acknowledged the coming end. Brothers and sisters in arms, bonded against peril. "Hold the line! Cover each other!" Monroe's voice rose over the noise, allowing no dissent. Soldiers nodded, moved into position, resolve united. Connors stayed fixed on her station, breathing steady despite her pounding heart. Her fingers never stopped. Every input a prayer, every command a hope. The dreadnought rumbled, intent. Below, soldiers rattled ammunition, standing fast against fate itself. The fleet's transmission crackled one last time. "Hold on!" Nearly there. The humans knew their mission. Hold the line. Endure the heavens' wrath a few minutes more, humanity's bastion on this planet. In those minutes, they would show their spirit. Monroe stared at the black underbelly of the giant enemy ship hovering above. "Go!" he shouted to his battered, tired soldiers. They charged across the burned land toward the safe zone under the ship, weapons ready. The ship was blind there. Enemy General Craxus emerged from the smoke, blood oozing from his wounds onto his dark armor. His elite guards rallied around him with a low growl. Their footsteps pounded as they moved to block the humans. The guards formed a wall of claws and plasma rifles, eyes glaring at the charging humans. The armies smashed together fiercely. Humans ducked claws and swung rifle butts. Plasma fire cracked as soldiers shouted and metal clashed. Monroe tackled a guard, felt hot breath, and was yanked back into place. Rifle shots snapped fast on both sides at point-blank range. Craxus used hand signals, and the guards formed up around him. Monroe silently ordered flanking fire to chip away at the formation. Craxus charged with his plasma blade swinging. Monroe ducked the hot blade that singed his hair. He pushed back as soldiers flanked to hold the line. Connors knelt behind wreckage, steady hands working her rifle. She picked shots to protect her comrades from the crushing alien force. Craxus's guards fell one by one to her precise aim. The giant ship above rumbled and stirred, preparing for something big. But below, the humans found their rhythm of survival. With each fallen guard, they pressed closer, chanting a hammer blow against enemy morale. Craxus fought brutally, towering over the humans. but they met his blows with agility and heart, relentless. They moved like a force of nature, earning each step with sweat and blood. Monroe clashed with Craxus again, their struggle reflecting the surrounding chaos. He grappled with the general, diverting the deadly swings. His squad covered him with protective fire. The ground shuddered under awakening engines overhead. But human and alien kept fighting under the ship's frame, neither yielding. Craxus bellowed orders, but human shouts swallowed his voice. Each moment stretched as wills clashed in the ship's shadow. The humans, with earth under their boots and fire in their chests, pressed the Zarek might, inch by inch. Monroe's eyes stayed locked on his opponent, promising humanity would never break. The ship's engines growled louder, an omen of the coming storm. But human and Zarek remained locked in battle, their fates intertwined by war. Monroe led his soldiers, a beacon of courage. Their presence testified to the human spirit's iron will. Monroe grabbed the guard's wrist inches from his face, stopping the strike. He punched its throat. The alien gurgled and fell, its weapon clattering away. Around them, soldiers battled the sky fortress. They had to keep fighting. Every second helped Earth. Suddenly it got brighter overhead. New ships sliced through the clouds, flying Earth's colors. The aliens froze, looking up. The humans pushed ahead, boots sliding in the mud, mixing alien blood with dirt. Craxus glared at the new ships, face swollen where Monroe hit him. He screamed orders, but the engines drowned him out. Monroe tackled a guard, and they crashed down. He rolled up and kept fighting. The dreadnought's guns sputtered, as explosions came not from them but the new ships. The soldiers cheered over the noise. Craxus slashed at the air, trying to rally them, but confusion spread through their ranks. The circle tightened around the guards as human weapons fired with precision. The humans had nothing left to lose except their planet and people. The dreadnought shuddered as a barrage hammered its hull. Metal peeled away with a sweet sound to the fighters. More hits tilted the giant ship, taking its place in the sky. The aliens broke formation, firing blindly as they retreated. Prey now, not predators. Monroe rallied his platoon. Now! They charged ahead, firing at the broken ranks as Craxus became just another target. The line crumbled fast. Under the bright sky, Monroe yelled to push them back, and they did, advancing as their ships bombarded the dreadnought into smoke and fire. Monroe watched the guards fall, the aliens losing ground. Hammer and anvil, Earth and her people bent the galaxy by force as the dreadnought tried and failed to rise against humanity's power. The humans fought on, every fallen alien a victory. The ships had turned the tide, their fire bringing hope to the battered but unbroken people. Monroe stood amid it all, watching, fighting, leading, showing humanity's endurance to the end. Craxus stood in the chaos of the battlefield, armor scorched and dented. His eyes locked on Monroe, battered but unbroken. Craxus's hand flexed, weapon still clutched, a sign of respect. The skies burned with the Zarek fleet's doom as Earth's ships struck. Craxus watched streaks of light as his soldiers retreated. He focused again on Monroe, nodding in acknowledgement of humanity's defiance. "You humans!" Craxus rumbled, voice crackling. "Small and fragile, but strong in will." He pointed at Connors, scanning for threats with her rifle raised. "That one, not the largest, but her mind bested us." Connors glanced their way, ever alert. The architect of victory, her face showed only focus. Work remained. Monroe stepped closer, armors almost touching. "We're not the biggest or strongest," he said firmly, "but humans rise to the challenge. We don't fall easily or forget allies or enemies." Around them, soldiers watched this exchange. Human and Zarek alike paused as warriors and commanders met. Words sealing the battle's end and perhaps a new beginning. Craxus inclined his head in formal respect. "I will remember humanity's tenacity. No joy, just hard-earned respect through war. "We'll remember you," Monroe promised, a warning. "We'll be ready if this happens again." Both sides watched and waited. The conflict ended not with death, but resonant words. Craxus's troops hesitated, then lowered weapons, retreating in silence. Monroe's soldiers held fast, fingers easing off triggers, a breath, futures unwritten. Then cheers roared as humans claimed victory, relief, and triumph over exhaustion. The Zarek withdrew slowly, unavoidable, yet almost reluctant. Monroe turned to his battered, dirt-streaked platoon. They had done the impossible. This ground, this planet, ours again. Earth always rises, always fights. We stand together. The cheers swelled, uplifting hearts that had seen too much death and fear. Monroe's words promised all. Humanity would stand its ground, always. The cannons went silent. The soldiers collapsed, gasping for air, their weapons hanging loose. The Zarek retreated, running or surrendering. Monroe's platoon was scattered on the torn land. Their faces showed victory, pain, exhaustion. They looked at each other, bonded, without words. What they felt could not be said, pride and sorrow mixing together. A young private limped to help a comrade, wrapping his bleeding arm in a scrap of uniform. Calls for medics echoed. The skilled gave first aid, fighting to stop bleeding and dress wounds. Veterans crouched by the dead, helmets on their hearts in silent respect. Tears made trails in the dirt on their faces, but they cried quietly, with dignity. In the distance, engines roared louder as human ships arrived. They landed like giant metal birds. Hatches opened and aid poured out with fresh troops. Soldiers collapsed into medics' arms, their job done, their stand firm. Amidst the chaos, an officer approached Monroe, crisp in the disorder. She shook his hand firmly, looking at him seriously and warmly. "Monroe Connors," she said, cutting through the engine noise. "You turned the tide. You're promoted now." She handed them new insignia, showing their courage. Connors, face smeared with soot, smiled rarely, white teeth on dark cheeks. She nodded at her new rank, determination in her eyes. The officer went on, "This is just the start. Get ready for the next phase. Humanity depends on it." The message and stakes were clear. So was their achievement. The soldiers, some leaning on others, gathered around Monroe and Connors, pillar-like, in their stand. Monroe looked up at the twinkling stars, beacons of hope bearing witness to humanity's resolve. Connors clutched her rifle, now a symbol, grinning louder than any cheer. They huddled, making plans. Charts and holograms lit the air with strategies. Connors spoke precisely, sparking the plans. "We hit them where it hurts. We've shown what we can do. Now we drive it home." Monroe nodded, stepping up. His voice was gravel, firm with resolve. "You heard her. Rest, resupply, then back in. For the fallen, for Earth, for the future." Agreement rumbled through the ranks. Eyes flashed, hands clenched or gripped shoulders in silent promise. This day's legend would ripple through the stars, defiance and strength. The battle was won. The war went on, but humanity stood ready, unbending. The story was not ending. It was just beginning.